It's a basic question, but it's the one that you have to answer. What's in it for me?
Previous to the pandemic, you had work days, 5 days a week in the office. Working from home was an alien concept.
My mood could change within 10 minutes from complete desperation to suddenly being on top of the world. We haven't created leaders who know how to and feel comfortable creating accountability.
With business development, there's only two factors that you need to be working towards, isn't it? Trust and relationships.
You can never undervalue leadership's role in a change.
Welcome to the podcast From Cold to Close. My name is Saeed and I'm the founder here at SRC Growth Partner, a company that works with professional services firms from around the world to help them increase their revenue and profitability by acquiring new clients. My guest today is Patrick McCreesh. Patrick is the managing partner and co-founder of Simatree, a company that helps organizations harness the strengths of exceptional people to help them transform their organization and build modern solutions. Patrick provides executive leadership on strategy, analytics, and change management through consulting, facilitation, and research. He successfully leads a team to develop strategic plans and analytics programs and guides change management on large-scale transformations. Patrick designs and executes institutions that are built to last with 18 years of consulting experience, including more than a decade with consulting leader Booz Allen Hamilton. He is a leader in the global change management community and brings global best practices to each engagement. Patrick, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me.
No, it's a pleasure, and I'm really looking forward to our conversation today. I think you'll be able to share some really great insights, having spoken to you previously. But I feel like the best place to start with all of our podcasts, is at the beginning, right? And your journey to where you are today. So for our viewers and listeners, could you give a brief background on your journey to where you are today and the current role you play within the business?
Yeah, I think my entire journey has really been around consulting in some form or fashion. I kind of started in political consulting, doing survey research, working with organizations and candidates who were trying to determine their best message for advocacy. And I learned a lot in that space around client service and learned that I had more of an interest in kind of analytics and quantitative research to support strategy than I had previously understood. Then I kind of transitioned into more of what we call general management consulting, where you kind of live in a funnel of being very broad, then getting down to something very specific, and then kind of the funnel opens up into more of like timekeeper, where you start to then become more broad again. And so for me, that journey was coming in, learning a lot around performance management, strategy, process improvement, then getting very narrow around really what does that mean in the world of data, and then how do you bring process, change management strategy to your data and through your data, and then broadening back out to look at organizations and think, are organizations using their data the way they should? And it was at kind of the end of that process of going from broad to narrow to broad again that I realized, I think I want to go do this on my own. And I left Booz Allen, as you mentioned, and started my own company in 2018, starting Simatree with the desire to help people who wanted to do the same thing, who wanted to take their really unique or their really broad skills to support organizations through times of transformation, growth, and data usage. So we really have normed around two very simple constructs. We try to, as you said, help exceptional people find exceptional organizations they want to work with. And then also that through that alignment, we can help organizations grow. So our tagline is align and grow, and it has been since we started the company.
Love it, love it. So you spent a decade in Booz Allen before you founded Simatree. What motivated you to make that transition from a large consulting firm to starting your own venture? Obviously, it's a big step for many people, and those who might be in their own roles in a consulting firm, or those who have taken the step and maybe haven't necessarily found super success. Are you able to explain the transition and how you moved into that area?
Yeah, the large consultancies are fantastic at helping you build your base skills. And they are also really great at helping to grow leaders. And then at a certain point, and unfortunately, I'm going to keep using the same word, you have to determine whether you have alignment with the organization's long-term strategy and their kind of work style, culture. And for me, I absolutely had alignment with the culture. I loved working at Booz Allen. It was a wonderful place. I learned a lot. Some of my best colleagues today came from that space. And where I think I didn't have alignment at the time was in the strategy. The organization was and is very focused on federal government contracting, and I wanted to do more in the commercial space. And so there was that tension. Plus, for better or worse, Booz had made me a very entrepreneurial person. It had harnessed something within me that I was bringing to the company in a number of different projects, which I loved, like helping the company think about how it would have a chief data officer and how that chief data officer would operate, how the company would go through a major multi-year transformation. But all that entrepreneurism that was sitting inside of me and being practiced successfully within Booz, I think just overflowed at a certain point and kind of took me out on a new venture.
Yeah, I can imagine there's a bug, isn't it? As soon as you taste it, as soon as you see it, then it's very hard to fight the urge, and you go out on your own and you make your way into the big wide world and try and make the best of it as you can. I absolutely love that. In terms of then the biggest trends you're seeing, especially your expertise lies in change management. I think you've written a book on change management as well. What trends are you currently seeing in how firms need to adapt their service offerings in the new age, 2025 onwards? What other trends are you seeing?
Well, so I think there's probably two or three different angles on this. One is change management itself. What is happening with change management? It has worked so hard to become an independent discipline, only to find that it isn't an independent discipline and that it can't be out there on its own. That it needs to closely align with and work with a number of other organizational disciplines and really be an underlying service on a number of different activities. And so, to be more precise, we think of change management. A lot of times you think of a company getting a new system. How does that system transformation happen? And how do the people that are going through that transformation get affected? So that is certainly a classic use case and one that will continue. But now organizations are evolving so quickly and there's so much evolution that it's not necessarily going to be a clean episodic project that you're going to see that needs change management. A lot of times, just the pure processes of the organization and building a continuous improvement cycle is a change unto itself. And getting people to let go and think differently about how the organization can continuously evolve is the underlying change. So change management then becomes a part of everything that you do. And it should be a major leadership training process for most organizations. I don't know an organization where the leaders get to the top and say, like, I wish that I hadn't learned about change management. Like, they're always looking for more understanding of how people change because behavior change drives everything. So that's the change management trend that I definitely see. On the technology side, I mean, we obviously see a couple of different trends. AI obviously is huge. Everybody loves to talk about it, but appropriate use cases for AI for the context of the company and the organization you're working with, that's the piece that I think has still not quite been figured out. I don't know that anyone has cracked the code or asked ChatGPT, how would you best work in my organization? And if you could write that article and figure out that construct for people, I think you'd be in a really great place. I have a colleague in the change space, Tim Creasy, who's doing a lot on this right now, and I think he's getting closest to helping organizations really start to take a step back with AI and take a look at where it's going to serve them for the next 5 to 10 years. But that's obviously a big one in the technology space. And then I think the third, and I don't know that I have the right language around it, maybe somebody does, but really thinking about what customer centricity means. For years, we tried to make customer centric more efficient. How do we get through each task as fast as possible? And really getting back to enriching relationships with customers is something that I think a lot of organizations want. I think that's going to be the more human side of especially professional services going forward. And for that to work effectively, you may need AI on the back end, but ultimately you need AI to enable a more enriching relationship with your customers on the front end.
Absolutely. I think that you touched on some really interesting points there. Every episode that we have, we always touch on AI, and AI is very topical, as you've mentioned there. And I think it's more so interesting, especially with professional services firms, because it's such a relationship driven kind of space. It becomes a factor of how is it implemented into an organization. So I think it's a really interesting question. In your own experience, what are the most common obstacles or organizations face when implementing significant change in an organization?
Yeah, I mean it's a basic question, but it's the one that you have to answer. What's in it for me?
Yeah.
Every time it is what's in it for me. And I would couple that with how you can break through that. You want to understand why people are a part of your organization in the first place. And one of the things that we've explored deeply in our research around kind of the brain and how the brain connects in with our change management behaviors, we've discovered that people build attachments to organizations that are really healthy. They're a part of the organizational culture. The things that I just said earlier about why I like Booz, people say about their companies all the time. It's giving me opportunity. I have my best friends here. I've created a real community here. That's incredible. But when you make a change, you need to understand those same connection points and how they're going to be disrupted by the change, because that's really what's in it for someone. And a lot of times people think, well, we can throw money at it and that's all that people care about. So we'll solve it by paying them more. Or, well, they won't have a choice. The lack of optionality will be the reason that they'll adapt. But they will exit if those things don't hit their underlying reasons for being a part of the company in the first place. So what's in it for them may not be something that is a traditional HR or corporate lever. It might be, my best friend works next to me. If you separate our two chairs, I'm going to lose my mind and quit in the next 2 weeks. So you just have to think that is the biggest barrier, is being personalized. And so everything I said about customer centricity and how are you going to serve customers better equally applies to employees. And you've got to think about each employee and their individual journey on a change curve to be more successful.
I think that's such an interesting way to look at it. And I think it's just by saying what's in it for me and what's in it for them, you can really step into the shoes of the team, the employees that you're looking at, and trying to manage and mitigate any obstacles that come about. So I think that's really interesting. In terms of key insights, you've had many clients over the years. When a client or an engagement starts, what key insights from that work do you find yourself applying most frequently with when you start an engagement? So in terms of when they come in, what's the blueprint? How do you help them manage that change?
Well, first and foremost, I think that no two changes or organizations are created equally. But we have a lot of analogs of behaviors that work and don't work. And so there's certainly a lot of the large consultancies, I think perhaps that the error that they often make is believing that the blueprint will work in every situation and then trying to force the clients into the blueprint. And then what you're actually asking them to do is make more change, because you're not joining them on the journey of the change they're going through. You're telling them you have to change to my approach and then we'll work on your change. And so that's one that I don't believe in. I do think we have a lot of best practices. I do think that there is a path, but that the path is really simplistic, and then you build the layers that make sense for that organization with kind of an overall toolkit. So when it comes to key lessons, I think there's probably three that I could immediately throw out. One is that you can never undervalue leadership's role in a change. Leadership is a topic that has probably 500 books a year written on it. And I don't know if you've ever seen the Bass Leadership Handbook. It's like this thick of every study that's ever been done on leadership, and then it's
Oh,
like
wow.
like 2 lines on each one. I mean, when you talk about something that might a book that might demonstrate the intensity of the problem that we have, like, that's it, right? Because we're writing so much about leadership, but we're not creating better leaders. So leadership is number one. Number two on that is most organizations undervalue their people and their data. And when you undervalue your people and your data and you want to go through a change, you're doing yourself a disservice, because both your data and your people can help you through the change. You can use more data driven techniques in order to support change management. So you can find things like, whether it's organizational network analysis, where you try to understand the underlying connections that sit in an organization. That's a data driven approach. Or it's simply just saying, we're going to have a cadre of really strong leaders that we like, who are really well connected, and we find them in a qualitative way. Then you're valuing your people, you're valuing the data that supports that, and you bring that together to be more successful. And then the third is just empowerment. I see time and time again that people do not understand what empowerment is. Most often, employees want to have tasks that they go and do that help them be more successful, but that doesn't necessarily work unless you bring together the 4 tenets of empowerment, which are
Mm.
clearly authority to do something, but also, most importantly, information and tools to be successful. And then I think the fourth piece that people often miss is accountability. It does no good to tell someone to go solve this strategic problem and give them no deadline, give them no checkpoints, and give them no tools or skills to go do it. So that accountability piece, which often people think of as micromanagement, doesn't have to be that way. It can simply be, I'm giving you this, and I love the word that Adam Grant uses, the scaffolding. I'm giving you the scaffolding to go solve this problem. You come back and tell me how you're going to do it. So if you would bring those together, those are big tenets of how we do change management.
No, it's really interesting to hear that as well, and especially I love that last point the fourth point you mentioned about accountability. It's easy to tell people what to do and give them an idea of what needs to be done, but if there isn't a level of responsibility and accountability that's taken by each individual or the leaders, then things can't actually change, right? And it's all words in the ether, right? And yeah.
Yeah, and that's where I think the leadership piece, the way I just laid those out for you, I think that's where the leadership piece and the individual employee narrative connect back in. We haven't created leaders who know how to and feel comfortable creating accountability at the same time that we have a multi-generational workforce where people will easily throw out this person doesn't want to do this thing, they're too lazy. That's not it. You have a leadership responsibility to create accountability that makes sense for the roles you're working in.
Yeah, and that's often the hardest part of leadership, right? To lead people, and every organizational problem from when businesses started, what it has been around people and
Yes.
managing people, right?
Yes.
It's the bottleneck of every single business, but that's why the best businesses have the best leaders that are able to galvanize the team to be able to move in the right direction. So I think I couldn't agree more with you. I think in terms of approaching change management, we went through probably a few years ago one of the biggest changes in modern history, being the pandemic and COVID and post-pandemic life, right? Previous to the pandemic, you had work days, 5 days a week in the office. Working from home was an alien concept. You never had your own laptop unless you were senior enough to be able to have that opportunity to. How has the approach to change management evolved in recent years, particularly with the acceleration of digital transformation? I mean, we're having a conversation here across the pond, and people are doing that now more than ever internally.
Yeah, I think we did a large scale transformation of a new system rollout that really impacted probably about 700 or 800 people on a daily basis, and then probably 5,000 on a less than daily or on a yeah less than daily, probably like once a week type of basis. And we did it in 2020. We had been working with the build out of the technology in 2019. We were at the right place, and so we had to make the decision in, I guess it was probably June, July of 2020, whether we were going to continue to drive forward with the transformation or wait for whatever came next. We decided to go forward with it, and the hardest and the lesson I pull from that, and like kind of to answer your question directly, I think the hardest thing right now is when people are going through a digital transformation, when they're going through a change where they really want you to be seated next to them to feel the change alongside them, and you can't do that. That's incredibly hard. Like some of our biggest tools in the toolkit of change management are things like training, train the trainer, on ground support, and really sitting with people to help them understand it, like really white glove service to make sure that these folks feel comfortable making the transition. And if you can't do that, then you have to think differently. Right. So now you have to decide what makes sense for you. But a couple of things that I like to advocate are if it's a digital transformation in a digital space done virtually, think about how to gamify it. I mean, I know that sounds silly, but you're already getting people kind of completely engaged with their machine and being digital 100% for this particular transformation. So why not go ahead and show a leaderboard of who's worked through the trainings the fastest, like who is, I don't know, using the system most regularly. Like put a little element of that on there because then you can keep it digitally connected and virtually observed. Another one that I love to tell people is that just because you're not sitting next to someone doesn't mean you can't feel their pain. Like the screen sharing aspects and our ability to do tools like us talking right here, like these tools have become incredibly powerful over the last 5 years, and they allow us to try to feel someone's pain virtually. So try to feel someone's pain virtually. And it gets back to what I said earlier. Like if you can get into someone's shoes and what they're going through, through, then you should be able to help them through the change because they just want someone who hears them and understands them. And then, of course, there's skill gaps, but the skill gaps we know we can solve virtually.
I think it's really interesting. And one of the things you speak about often and spoke about a few times already today is leadership, right? And there was one of the 4 points that you mentioned earlier. You and Simatree work with organizations of various sizes, from startups, mid-sized companies, and large enterprises. How does leadership differ in these organizations, or does it even differ? What should leaders be looking to do in these types of organizations?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, the leadership definitely differs across size, scale, scope, all of whatever you're trying to accomplish. There are definitely differences. There are commonalities, especially in professional services, that we see kind of struggles time and time again. So first of all, like on whether it differs, there is no doubt that startups are going to have the founder syndrome. They're going to have the founder's dilemma of when do I scale something? When do I distribute the work? When do I bring in capital versus when do I bootstrap it, build it myself? There's no doubt that that's going to continue on startups and smaller organizations. When you get to mid-sized, I think that there's actually a lot more in common between mid-sized organizations and large-scale organizations than we like to think, because really, once you get to about 100 people, you're in a bureaucracy. And the elements of bureaucracy start to come in, whether it's a division or the organization. You need to start to think about maturing yourself toward a more effective bureaucratic system. And I know that sounds like jargon and garbage, but the reality is bureaucracies do have good things to them. And one of them is the specialization of the roles and the generalization of the leadership. And so that's the challenge that we often see in professional service companies, is that when they get to that critical juncture of 100, 500 people, they don't appreciate that now it's about specialization of roles and the leaders becoming more general. So going back to what I said to you at the beginning about that funnel that that time, a little timekeeper, right? That has to happen. And leaders have to start to think, I'm not the best person to do the specialized tasks that got me to this place. I'm now the generalized person that's really great at leading those kind of people. And that's so hard for any organization. What made you successful getting up there to the top is not what makes you successful as a generalized leader.
Yeah, I think you always hear stories about when you're building a business or building a company, there's so many layers to running that company, and you have to grow into the roles that you are given at each stage of growth. And that might be at first you're in it for everything. For example, Gymshark's CEO, I think is Ben Francis. He was for the first million or 10 million, I think he said that he was in with everything. And then it got to a point where he was a CEO of a mid-sized company, but he didn't feel like he was doing the right type of job. So he had to demote himself into specific roles to learn more about the business, and hired a CEO to actually become a more general manager of the whole organization. And now he's the CEO after having a better understanding of the organization. So I think it's really interesting to hear the growth that's involved with being a really great quality leader.
Yeah, let me give you just a small example of that I love. This was years ago, so I don't know if they still do it. It was probably 2007 timeframe. I was doing some work with the LAPD. And with the LAPD, every time someone was promoted, they had to go back in the car for a month to be back on the streets before they could take the promotion. That mindset is it. I use that example all the time. That's the mindset you want your leaders to have, that they really can do any job in the organization. And especially for founder led organizations, if you come into it and you don't want to do every job, you don't want to be a founder. I truly believe that. Like, you're fooling yourself.
Yeah,
And then
exactly.
when you think about like mid-sized organizations and some of the challenges that they have, then it gets into, you were just talking about it a minute ago, when do I delegate? When do I give that up? And I think it was Reid Hoffman's Masters of Scale, where one of his lessons was you have to personally hire your first 500 people. Now, it doesn't mean that you're sourcing them and going through every interviews, but you should at least interview them. You should at least know who's coming into your company in a founder-led mid-sized organization. So those are two little tests that I love to keep in mind for organizations.
Yeah, I love it. Getting into the weeds to prove that you can lead, right?
Yes. In the
I
lead to lead. There you go. I love it.
just made that up on the spot and I love it.
Yeah, me too. I'll give you credit, but I
Yeah,
love it.
I'll
I'm
take
going to use it.
it. Yeah, for sure. Patrick, you have, and not many people can say this, but you've had it's fair to say, a reasonable element of success in your entrepreneurial journey. One of the aspirations for many founders is to be acquired, to exit their business, to have a liquidity event, or to get out and show, okay, I did it, or I've done well, and I've had a good journey. Your company was acquired in 2021 by a private equity backed company. How did that acquisition change your vision for the company? How does it change the organization? What effects happen post acquisition?
Yeah, so I think that, well, first of all, our acquisition was a little unique because it was one of our clients. We had been working with them for 3 years. We got to know each other really well, and it was almost an awkward conversation of, okay, now it's just time to buy you guys. Like we really enjoy working with you, but now let's just buy you. And although I say that that's unique, when I listen to a lot of product podcasts or even like digital podcasts, you often hear that a possible exit strategy is exactly the company you were trying to disrupt in the first place. Like, so you hear a lot of digital startups saying, like, we're going to go after Amazon, we're going to do this, and then they get acquired by Amazon, right? And so, I think when you start to think about our situation, maybe it's not as uncommon as we think. We weren't trying to disrupt that market, but we were trying to support the privately held company Galway that we were working with at the time. And so our acquisition was a natural extension of that support, where we now support them internally and we still have external clients. But the key piece, and I think this is where, if I have two lessons, I guess, for thinking about exit strategy, lesson number one is when you're going out to get your first investment, everyone wants to know your exit strategy. And I actually think it's okay to say we have multiple paths to an exit strategy. And if you say you're going for an IPO, or you're saying you're going to be acquired by a competitor, or you're just, you're going to try to build this for the long term, you don't really know. So why not think through what are all the possible exit strategies and then present them equally? I mean, to me, that's where we were when we built Simatree. I said I could see us building this for the next 5 years, selling it to a big consultancy, or potentially building this for much, much longer and becoming really like a family owned business that we want to grow for the long term. And those were two possibilities. We didn't have one being bought by a client, but that's the one that ended up coming through. And then the second piece, and again, to harp on the word alignment, is you have to have alignment with what you want to accomplish and what the company that's acquiring you wants from you. In our case, they said very clearly to us, the chairman of the holding company himself said, I'm excited to see you exit this stage where you're so worried about the next day, and we're excited to see you be able to grow with capital backing you toward your vision. So my vision didn't change at all when we were acquired. Our team didn't change at all when we were acquired. We did get a lot of assets. The holding company provided us and provides us a lot of great shared services that we would have been paying commoditized prices for commoditized service instead of getting the personalized service that we get now by being a part of a larger company. But really, nothing else changed. That was the commitment at acquisition, and it's been the reality through the experience.
Wow, that's quite a great story in that sense, because you always hear mergers and acquisitions taking place, and then one of my questions would have been, how does that affect the culture within the organization when that something like that actually happens? Because it's a big change for any organization when there's a merger, when there's a buyout of any sort. So you're saying that there wasn't any change in culture, and it was just back to every day as it was before.
Well, I wouldn't say that there was no change in culture, but I actually think there was a positive change in culture that came for us. We were a
Mhm.
small consultancy and we were working with clients, and we were out there, we were scrappy finding our clients. We still are, I think, pretty scrappy finding our clients. But I think that when we were acquired and we had a set of portfolio companies that we could work with, it created the opportunity for some of our employees to do things in a safe space that they hadn't been able to find a client to do it with yet. We started talking about AI, right? Not many people want to jump fully into AI, but we have portfolio companies that want to test the waters. And we can do that. And we can help them build out really lightweight AI solutions. and we can help deploy them and test change management around AI. And we're doing it in a space where it's mutually beneficial. We're not charging them ridiculous prices because they're inside the family. They're getting a trusted vendor that is on the same technological platform, so they're not worried about where their data is going. So that's been a really interesting positive cultural element. And then I think another thing that we did from the start that has maybe lessened is we've always thought of the people who are engaged in the company as our shareholders. So at the start of the company, we had a couple of key people who helped us get started, and we thought of them as shareholders. And literally every month, I wanted to give them a shareholder report and think about that. And I never wanted to use the shareholders against the employees. I don't agree with that mindset that, oh, it's the quarterly, you've got to now change your behavior because we're trying to get our quarterly results. That's not my style. But because we had that mindset that there was somebody else who was invested in us, when we then sold, we had someone else invested in us. We still report to them. And I try to show the same report to our team members that I show to the holding company. So we walk through the same financial numbers, absolute transparency to both sides of the equation of what we're working on. So employees and investors are seeing the same thing. So we started from the very beginning with that mindset that we have investors and shareholders, and that became a reality when we were sold.
It makes a lot of sense, and it goes back to that word that you said at the top of the podcast a few times, and that's alignment. You create alignment within the organization, and that's powerful in itself. Patrick, this segment of the podcast we like to call the Entrepreneur's Room. These are series of questions that we ask all of our guests to give our listeners and viewers an opportunity to get into the mind of an entrepreneur and understand what it is to be an entrepreneur. So the first question I'd like to ask in this section is, how are you currently spending your days as a leader in the business?
That's a great question. I like to think that I'm spending it about 5 different ways every day. But in reality, it's probably more like I spend 1 day a week doing each of these 5 things that I'm about to say. But it's business development. And I do think that I still spend a good amount of time on business development, serving clients without a doubt. Everyone in our company is serving clients, and I serve clients too. And that's a big part of kind of our culture. The third is definitely finding the right people to be a part of our ecosystem. So that has many elements to it. It's not just people to hire, but it's also teaming partners. It's also people that we may rely on as subcontractors or be a subcontractor to. And then I would say that the fourth is there is operational administrative work that needs to be done. Anyone who doesn't want to take that on and doesn't want to think about it equally to everything else is kind of fooling themselves. Like, you got to do it, right? And then the fifth, and this is the one that I kind of spend every morning on, is culture. I mean, there is no doubt that I spend most of my time thinking about culture for my team and for my clients. And I am always thinking about my clients' culture and what I can learn from it and what we can affect within it. And so I probably spend 40% of my time on culture, but sometimes it looks like one of those other things. So this is a business development opportunity. Will it support our culture? This is a potential hire. Does this person support our culture? So I don't know if my percentages are 100% right, but it's probably somewhere in there.
I think it matches whenever we speak to entrepreneurs and leaders and CEOs of businesses, they often say the same things or similar things with that question, and primarily because these are the important factors of running an organization, right? And if you, as a strategic leader at the top, you need to be responsible for those strategic decisions. And one is growing the business, the other is making sure the business is a great place for people to be working in. So those two things go hand in hand. The business doesn't grow if you don't do business development, but the business is in a great place, or company is in a great place to be in if you don't work on culture, right?
That's right.
And so on and so forth. In terms of as a leader, you obviously have things that you look at in terms of, and you're a data driven individual, so this might be quite interesting. What are the most important metrics for you in the business? What do you look at to run the business? So that might be pre-acquisition and post-acquisition. Maybe give us some insights on how that's changed, if it has at all.
Yeah, I think that there's no doubt you're looking at the financials on a monthly basis, but try not to think about them on a monthly basis. Like, try to put them in the context of the larger arc. So we literally have a visual that's like the last 10 quarters, because we're trying to think longer term than just quarter to quarter. And so I don't like to do comparisons to last year. In our business, each year is different. You have a different client set each year. You kind of rotate, and so maybe another one is what percentage of our business is in one of our three big buckets that we think about. So in the holding company, with commercial clients or nonprofit, and with federal government clients. And so we have the business broken down into those kind of three big buckets. So, I'm kind of thinking about that. But I think most importantly is the data we're getting from our team. So we because we're in the federal government space in the United States, we have to track every hour. I mean, we like literally every minute, right? So I try to use that data to our advantage. And for example, in last year, we made a huge initiative for everyone in the company to take at least 3 longer trainings on AI, job specific. So our more engineering types, we're going very deep on how to leverage a specific tool. Maybe it was how to use Microsoft's AI platform, or maybe it was how to go deep on ChatGPT. But for those of us that maybe were a little bit softer skill, we were thinking about prompt engineering. Point is, when we finished that exercise, I could go back to the hourly reports and see how much time people had put into that. It wasn't just that, oh, I took a training. It's, did you put the time into it? And that time becomes really important for training and development. But another piece that's really important is, are they taking vacation? Do we see that people are taking the time to unwind and recharge? Are people working too many different clients that might be kind of splitting their brain too much? So that time tracking is probably our biggest set of metrics. And when you put it together with the things that we do around our quarterly and annual review processes, where we're asking people to fill out brief surveys on what we're doing as a company, those two are really important. And then the last metric that's really important to me is our philanthropic work and how much we're doing each year, both in terms of hours, but also in terms of impact. So we do try to track that and put that out there.
I love it, and I always love hearing the types of metrics that are tracked. And as a management consulting firm itself, time tracking is a huge element, isn't it, in making sure that the timesheets are filled out, and making sure everything is done, so that it's clear where the at the end of the day, your people and your expertise are what you offer, right? So you
Absolutely.
need to know how, you need to be able to mechanize that to be able to then demonstrate the value you're able to provide to clients, as well as other factors. In terms of growing the business itself and growing the company, and you mentioned before you work a lot on business development. What business development activities are you doing? How are you currently growing the organization?
Yeah, so the most visible thing we can do is track what's going on with the US federal government and the spending there. And I say the most visible because most of that is publicly available information. That's a different type of pipeline forecasting that we can do in that space that's harder to do in commercial space. But then the second is engagement with partners and our ecosystem. It's critical to us. Like knowing what other people are hearing, whether it's in the federal space or the commercial space, is a big part of how we drive. Third, I would say our holding company is awesome at sending us friends and family that might have a problem that we can chat with, and we do a lot of that. Those are fantastic leads for us. And then fourth, I would say I do a lot of things like this. Like I try to put myself out there into different settings, different industries where we and get to know folks, and it's all relational. I mean, you can hear like we're not really going out there and like looking for RFPs or trying to assume a company has a problem and then white paper something to them that we know that they need. We just don't do much of that. We do a lot more of relational business development.
Yeah, no, it makes sense, and it's pretty standard in the industry, right? Relation with business development, there's only two factors that you need to be working towards, isn't it? Trust and relationships, and if
Yeah.
you can build those two, then business comes along, and that's what we tell all of our clients. In terms of the vision of the company and the organization, what is your vision of the company over the next 5 years? And obviously, you've been acquired now, so that might have changed from 5 years ago,
No,
previous. So,
no,
how,
I don't think it
yeah.
has. No, I think our vision is the same. I think it's always been that we really do believe that our clients have unique problems and need unique solutions, and that we're really good at finding the right people in and giving them the right tools and training to grow into solving those problems. And it really is exceptional people for exceptional organizations, building that thread. That is the vision. Now, if I'm talking to investors or our team in terms of our financial growth, yes, we'd love to double in size in the next 5 years, and we would do it by a healthy mix of an ever evolving US federal practice and commercial presence that is going to most likely include sports and entertainment as a growth area for us. And we want to continue to work with our partner companies in the private equity backed portfolio company or holding company we're a part of. That's it. I mean, it's not at its core, it's continue to just find really amazing people that we can connect into the organizations that we work with.
Love it. Love it. I love the consistency that it maintains even post acquisition, which can often change based off of the founder and the wins that you have. A couple more questions. The next one is, you've obviously been in business for many years now and you've had plenty of experiences. What are the biggest lessons you've had and what is it that you can share? And of course, that you might not be able to share every single one right now, but maybe the top two lessons that you could probably say.
Yeah. And so this, you want me to speak specifically to entrepreneurs on this, right? Like
Yes. Yes,
entrepreneurial
please.
lessons. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I heard one of the things I did when I was starting the company was listen to how I built this podcast nonstop. It was like a comfort blanket for me to know that other people were feeling the things I was feeling and had gotten through it. Right. So I think that one of the things that's really good advice is to understand that yes, other people have been through this experience, and the experience is most likely a roller coaster. When you're in a big business, when you're doing the work with a big organization behind you, that roller coaster may be up and down every month. When you're doing it as an entrepreneur, it's every day, maybe every hour. And my wife used to joke with me that like my mood could change within 10 minutes from complete desperation to suddenly being on top of the world. And I don't think I was dealing with any medical issues, but it did definitely seem that way to an outsider, right?
Oh,
So I think that's
yeah.
a big part of it. Like try to enjoy the highs, but don't go too high. Try to understand what the lows are telling you, but try not to go too low because it's probably going to change before you can finish that
Yeah.
feeling. So
Yeah.
I think that's a big one, right?
I think that's brilliant. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, I think the other one is that, and I think this is really important to me. I don't know if others will feel it the same way, but I started my business. We started Simatree in August of 2018. It was when my father passed away. And so he passed away the day we were going to launch the company. And I was sitting in the hospital talking to people about leaving Booz Allen and starting this business while I was watching. So for me, I think there's this test that I often have that is like, would he be proud of what I'm doing? And there's a little bit of that metric that I think everybody probably has. They probably have a mentor or a colleague or an organization, and they think, like, would this person appreciate what I'm doing right now? And that's a self accountability thing, right? That's no one's ever going to come down and tell me that. No one would say something like that. But I do think about that all the time.
Yeah, I love it. I love that. And I love the fact that your first point in being that steady Eddie, I can tell you from my own experience, my wife itself, like only takes an email and then my mood could go up or down, right? And it's just like, oh,
Absolutely.
yeah. And you look at your phone and it's just like, okay, we've got to deal with this. And I could have been the happiest person in the world. Suddenly you're like, different mood. And she's like, what's happened? What's going on? And then trying
Yeah.
to maintain that steady level throughout. It's harder, easier said than done. 100%. I love that. Well, Patrick, final question, and we end every single podcast with this one question. It's, if you had a magic wand you could wave to solve one business problem, what would that be?
Oh my gosh. One business problem with my magic wand. I think it would have to be around leadership. I mean, we've talked about it across this entire conversation. No good change management happens without leadership. No digital transformation happens without leadership. No business strategy is executed without successful leadership. So it's got to be around leadership. And I think it would be that every leader in major organizations would have some sort of training that they have to go to that teaches them how to be vulnerable. To me, it's not about authenticity. I think that word is actually now it's getting a little perverted, especially in the United States, where attempts at connection by using cultural symbols and things like that are being viewed as authenticity. That's not what it is for me. It is, are you actually vulnerable? Do people know what you're worrying about for the right reasons. I'm not saying, yeah, I don't want to take everybody in the company on that journey with me, but do they appreciate why something is getting to me, why I feel that way? And I think a lot of leaders need to be able to do that. I think in the US, and I'm sure it's true across the pond, that regulatory environments have made that really difficult for publicly traded companies to have vulnerable leaders. And I understand that. But go down a level or two and go to all the privately held companies. That would be my want, to
Yeah.
allow people to be more vulnerable.
Go into the weeds so you can learn to lead.
There you go.
There we go. Patrick, it's been an absolute pleasure. For our guests and listeners, for our viewers and listeners out there, if they wanted to find you or reach out to you, where would they go? What would they need to do?
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn is the easiest to find me there, but Simatree, our web address is Simatree, the number one.com. There, that's that's one of those things I wish I could change from the start and never did. But I believe in the UK you have a great saddle making company that like allows people to sit on trees called Simatree. So we lost out on that one. And please just connect with me, reach out to me, and I'm more than happy to talk to anyone about what's going on.
Fantastic. Well, Patrick, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for sharing your insights. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.